Have you ever heard someone say that Christianity is a white man's religion brought to Africa by European missionaries? Well, today we're going to completely dismantle that myth. The story of Christianity in Africa isn't a recent colonial import. It's a deep, ancient tale that starts right at the beginning of the faith itself. In fact, Christianity had thriving communities in Africa long before it reached many parts of Europe. So, buckle up, because we're about to journey back in time to uncover the true African roots of Christianity. Let's start our journey in North Africa, specifically in Egypt and what was then Carthage, modern-day Tunisia. This region was a bustling hub of the Roman Empire. The story of Christianity here begins not in the 15th or 16th centuries, but in the 1st century. Yes, you heard that right. According to tradition, it was Saint Mark the Evangelist, the author of the Gospel of Mark, who brought the Christian message to Alexandria, Egypt, around 49 AD. This was just a couple of decades after the life of Jesus Christ. From this single seed, the faith grew rapidly. By the end of the 2nd century, Alexandria had become one of the most important centers of Christian thought and learning in the entire world. It was home to the famous Catechetical School of Alexandria, a kind of ancient Christian university that produced some of the most brilliant minds of the early church. Thinkers like Clement of Alexandria and Origen were intellectual giants who blended Greek philosophy with Christian theology, shaping how Christians understood their faith for centuries to come. This wasn't a fringe movement. It was the intellectual heart of Christianity, and it was beating in Africa, just next door in Carthage. The story was similar. The church there was producing powerful voices and martyrs who were fiercely dedicated to their faith. The story of Saints Perpetua and Felicity, 2 young women martyred for their beliefs in Carthage in 203 AD, is one of the most moving and powerful accounts from the early church. Their courage inspired countless others. North Africa wasn't just receiving Christianity. It was actively shaping it, defending it, and dying for it. Now, let's travel east, down the Nile, and across the Red Sea to the powerful Kingdom of Aksum, located in modern-day Ethiopia and Eritrea. Here, the story takes a monumental turn. While Christians in the Roman Empire were still facing sporadic persecution, an entire African kingdom was about to officially embrace the faith. This happened in the 4th century, around the year 330 AD, under King Ezana. According to the story, 2 young Christian boys from Tyre, Frumentius, and Adin were shipwrecked on the Red Sea coast and brought to the Aksumite court. They gained the trust of the royal family and, over time, shared their faith. When King Ezana came to the throne, he was so influenced by Frumentius that he declared Christianity the official state religion of Aksum. Think about the timeline here. This was decades before the Roman Empire itself made Christianity its official religion under Emperor Theodosius in 388. It was centuries before countries like Ireland, England, or the Scandinavian nations converted. Ethiopia became one of the very first Christian nations in the entire world. The famous rock-hewn churches of Lalibela, carved out of single pieces of stone in the 12th century, are a breathtaking testament to this ancient, unbroken Christian tradition. They are not copies of European cathedrals. They are a uniquely Ethiopian expression of a faith that has been part of their national identity for over 1,700 years. This wasn't a faith imposed from the outside. It was embraced from the very top of a powerful African Empire. So we have these vibrant Christian centers in North Africa and an entire Christian kingdom in East Africa. But the African influence doesn't stop there. Some of the most important thinkers in the history of Western Christianity were African. Let that sink in for a moment. The very foundations of what both Catholics and Protestants believe today were laid by men born and raised on African soil. Let's talk about Tertullian. He was from Carthage, living in the late 2nd and early 3rd centuries. He was a brilliant lawyer before converting to Christianity, and he brought that sharp legal mind to his theology. Tertullian was the first major Christian author to write in Latin, the language that would dominate Western Christianity for over 1,000 years. He actually coined many of the key terms we still use today. Ever heard of the Trinity? The concept of God as 3 persons, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit in one substance. Tertullian was one of the first to articulate this in a systematic way. His work laid the groundwork for future councils and creeds. And then there's the big one, Augustine of Hippo. Born in 354 at Trigg-2 in what is now Algeria, Augustine is arguably the single most influential theologian in Western history outside of the biblical authors themselves. His mother, Monica, was a devout Berber Christian. Augustine's life story, which he tells in his famous book Confessions, is a dramatic tale of intellectual searching and spiritual wrestling that has resonated with people for centuries. But his impact goes far beyond his personal story. Augustine's writings on concepts like original sin, divine grace, and the nature of the church became the bedrock of Western Christian thought. His book, The City of God, was a monumental defense of Christianity after the sack of Rome. When Martin Luther and the Protestant reformers challenged the Catholic Church in the 16th century, who did they turn to for theological ammunition? Augustine, he's a towering figure, a true father of the church, and he was thoroughly African. The list goes on. We could talk about Cyprian, the Bishop of Carthage, who guided the church through intense persecution. We could discuss Athanasius of Alexandria, the Black Dwarf, as his enemies called him, who was the heroic champion of the doctrine of Christ's divinity at the Council of Nicaea. These weren't footnotes in church history. These were the main characters, the headline acts, and they were all from Africa. So what happened? Why did this common misconception that Christianity is a European religion take hold? Well, history is complicated. The rise of Islam in the 7th century led to a gradual shift in the religious landscape of North Africa. The vibrant Christian communities of Egypt, Carthage, and Numidia slowly dwindled over centuries, though the Coptic Church in Egypt has survived and maintained its ancient traditions to this day. This shift isolated the Ethiopian Church, which continued to thrive in its mountainous kingdom, but it was largely cut off from the rest of Christendom. Centuries later, when European explorers and missionaries arrived in sub-Saharan Africa during the colonial era, they often acted as if they were bringing the faith to the continent for the first time. They were either ignorant of this rich, ancient history or chose to ignore it because it did unfit their narrative of civilizing a dark continent. This colonial version of history is the one that has unfortunately stuck in the popular imagination. But the facts tell a different story. The story of Christianity is not a one-way street from Europe to Africa. In the early centuries, the flow of influence was often the other way around. African theologians were teaching the world. African kingdoms were pioneering what it meant to be a Christian nation. African martyrs were showing what true faith looked like. To say Christianity is foreign to Africa is to ignore St. Mark and Alexandria, to erase King Ezana of Aksum, and to silence the brilliant minds of Tertullian and Augustine. The roots of the faith on the continent are not shallow. They are deep, ancient, and profoundly influential. It's a history that every Christian, and indeed everyone interested in world history, should know and celebrate. It's a heritage that deserves to be reclaimed and placed at the very center of the Christian story, right where it belongs. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back in time. If you found this video enlightening, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into history. Let us know in the comments what part of this history surprised you the most. See you in the next video.